thanks to a freedom of information request by Senator Alex Antic, we now know 100% definitively that the Australian government itself, at least federally, right, was involved in censoring Australians through coordination with these foreign social media companies. At least 4,000 requests were made to these companies to take down posts or groups. We're not sure exactly the nature of the posts or what happened there, but we know that these requests were made and then they were followed through by these social media companies. At least 4,000 times this happened. So Australians were effectively silenced by their own government without the government itself providing the public with the protocols that they were using, with the guidelines, and making that information available. So this raises a lot of red flags and a lot of questions. How deep was the involvement of our government with these foreign social media companies? Were they coordinating with the White House in America, which has been shown through other similar freedom of information requests, and of course, more recently, the Twitter files, to have coordinated with these companies to silence, medical experts, to silence totally legitimate questions that people were asking about their government, to remove them from Twitter and from Facebook especially. So there's this deep entrenched relationship between these government bodies and these social media companies as it pertains to silencing people. And we now know that it's happened here in Australia. And I'm not shocked. I had these suspicions, but until we kind of saw it from this freedom of information request, it was not hard. It was not easy to definitively say this. And look, I'm very concerned about it. I think more needs to be done in terms of getting transparency exactly around what they censored, right? Under what guidelines they censored that, and what gave them authority to do that, in the sense of who was actually doing the censoring. I mean, was there some dude in the back office who had no expertise in any of this medical related stuff, censoring medical experts in Australia that had a different opinion? Was the government actually involved in silencing doctors and experts in Australia that had a contrary opinion? I mean, that doesn't seem right in a free and open society like Australia that they tell us that we live in. That's very concerning for me as a citizen. And I think we all need to get these answers now, because it's very clear that during that time, the information that we were getting, especially now after seeing this, was being very controlled and manipulated by people in power, namely the federal government. So look, let's get to this article. We'll just have a read through it. It was published in the Australian today, and it's also got some quotes from Senator Alex Antic, who put this request in. All right. Antic probe reveals Canberra silenced 4,213 COVID posts. Let's have a look. In less than 3 years, the federal government intervened at least 4,213 times to restrict or censor posts about the COVID-19 pandemic on digital platforms. A freedom of information request by Liberal Senator Alex Antic has revealed the number of interventions, but details about the reason or the guidelines under which they were made remain secret. I mean, that in and of itself is a problem. The fact that all of this is done in secret, right? So why the secrecy? Why not just make it public? Why such secrecy around the fact that this was happening and the process involved in doing this? Our government should be clearly communicating with us under what terms they are colluding, at the end of the day, colluding with these foreign companies to silence people in this country. I'll keep reading. It is entirely unclear to me why the Department of Home Affairs, a department which is primarily charged with the duty of overseeing matters like border control, has been using a backdoor arrangement with social media companies to influence the media in relation into matters such as public health, Senator Antic said. The Senator has called for a full explanation about what information was taken down from the digital platforms and why. I think that why is really important. The government really needs to explain to us now, or this department really needs to explain why that information was taken down, okay? How they formed the research or whatever it is where they were able to determine that information should be taken down. So was it information where people were saying, lockdowns are bad, or the government is doing the wrong thing, or this country is not locking down, why are we locking down? What type of posts were they taking down? And were they targeting, this is particularly important, were they targeting people who were political opponents, for instance, people who were political action groups or activist groups who were engaged in a form of activism? Now, just the other day, I spoke to an activist in Australia, Monica Smith, during that time. Her complete online presence on Facebook, at least, was wiped out during that time. Now, we know Craig Kelly, at the time, a member of parliament, his presence on social media was wiped out. We saw many groups in Australia that were discussing things like, response to lockdowns or things around COVID vaccine injuries. Those types of pages were removed. Did the government play a role in that? I mean, how deep does the government involvement in this goes? So many questions are now being raised, and I think, instead of us speculating about it, because this is what this does, right? We now know the government was doing this, so they should come clean as to how far they were involved in the censorship of their own citizens. On what basis is the department qualified to determine the truth associated with COVID-related matters? The South Australian Senator and vaccine mandate opponent asked. Are we seeing an Australian hashtag Twitter files? Look, I think, if Elon Musk can, he released the Twitter files for the US showing the coordination between the White House and Twitter to remove certain eminent people, their posts, to remove certain users that were getting a lot of traction on Twitter. And these were just for very, not too controversial in terms of the content of the post, just questioning what the government was doing at times. So very concerning that it was happening here as well. So Elon, maybe you can give us some more insight into the operational request that Twitter, especially in Australia, might have received. I have a suspicion, this is my own view, I think a lot of this happened more so on Facebook in Australia, but I don't think Zuckerberg is going to cooperate and help the Australian public, but Elon might. Let's go back to this article. I'll just skip a little bit of it. Senator Antic made the Freedom of Information application in December and received a review this month. That's a long time. Like, really? Come on, guys. He is now in possession of the Department of Home Affairs online content incident arrangement procedural guidelines, which details how the government works with digital platforms such as Facebook, Meta, Twitter, Instagram, and Google to monitor and intervene on conduct. Look, I understand the government may be involved in giving requests to these companies, especially around issues like extreme, terrorism-style content, or removing violent content that someone might post up, or something that's, of that nature. I think a lot of people in the public understand the government may be involved in doing this, and the companies themselves usually already have policies around identifying this type of content and removing it. But the content around the pandemic, around COVID, was a lot of the time people's opinions or people's disagreements with the governments, and contrary, right, equally valid opposing opinions from medical experts, right? So that's a totally different type of ball game. This is not terrorism and all this kind of stuff that the government can fall back on. This is people sharing their legitimate concerns, and scientists and doctors sharing an opposing expert opinion. Now, does the government get to have a say in all of that and control that information? I think that's what we're exploring here. I don't think they do. I definitely don't think they have a right over that type of control over information in this country, but it appears that they did do that. The document, subheaded Australian Domestic Crisis Response Protocol for Online Terrorist and Extreme Violent Content, designated as 1.3 from November, blah, blah, blah. It runs 28 pages, but aside from the title, every page has been fully redacted. I mean, should we be shocked that they gave a redacted document? The department provided a separate document summarizing numbers of interventions under these arrangements. It revealed that between Jan 2017 and December 2022, it had made 13,630 referrals to digital platforms to review content against their own terms of service. More than 9,000 of these were related to terrorism and violent extremism. Like I said, fair enough. I think there's scope for governments to be monitoring this type of thing, especially if they have some inside intelligence or information that a particular person is involved in these type of activities. that's kind of the role of law enforcement in that sense. But monitoring posts made by grandma or grandpa who are concerned about the government's actions as it relates to COVID-19, again, that's completely different. So don't let them hoodwink you and make you believe that somehow, because of terrorism and all this kind of stuff, the government has some sort of right to intervene in all our methods of sharing information with each other. They don't, and they shouldn't have. But 4,213 were COVID-19 related referrals. Given the pandemic was not declared and did not reach Australia until early 2020, more than 4,000 COVID-19 referrals occurred in less than 3 years. The COVID-19 interventions represent nearly 4 requests per day over that period. The coalition was in government for most of that time. Senator Antic says the Department of Home Affairs must explain the nature of the 4,203 requests made about COVID matters. And it goes on. Look, again, the biggest issue here is, for me, is that the government didn't make it clear that they were going to be censoring members of their community during that time. They made us believe that a lot of the times it was actually Facebook's, algorithm or their fact checkers. And we all know about how dodgy these fact checkers are. Like some of the fact checkers are linked to ABC, which is in itself gets government funding. And, we have this issue in Australia where a media organization is sometimes fact checking other media organizations. Does this seem correct? No, I mean, they do it in conjunction with a university, which is also linked to the government in many ways. So all of this is problematic. And we're just seeing now, thanks to the work of senators like Antic, this information trickling out into Australia, just how controlling our government was during that time. And seeing how things have turned out, right? Seeing the harms of a lot of their policies, seeing some of the harms that people in our country, you can't fact check this. There's a lot of people in this country now suffering because of vaccine injuries. And we have issues around information not being shared around excess deaths and so on. So seeing all these issues and now knowing that the government themselves were intricate in their involvement with these foreign companies to silence people in our country, I think we all deserve answers. And I hope Senator Antic stays on this and gets the answers that we all need. But we all need to make sure that we get this out, that people know that our government was involved in censoring us. Guys, that's all I have time for today. Thanks for watching. You can follow me on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and also Rumble at The Real Rukshan. See you next time.